What happens when Vata does not just disturb the body, but disturbs your future? That is the deeper question of the 11th house. Because the 11th house is not only about gains, goals, networks, support systems, and long-term aspirations. In the body mapping, it also governs the calves, ankles, circulatory system, and hypothalamic regulation. So when Vata rises here, you are not looking at one isolated imbalance. You are looking at instability in movement, instability in signaling, instability in anticipation, and instability in the way a person relates to the future itself. And this is where many students miss the depth. You look at the 11th house and say, friends, community, gains, fulfillment of desires. But when Vata disturbs this house, those very themes become restless. The person may not simply want more. The person may feel unable to settle into what they already have. The future keeps moving. The mind keeps scanning. The nervous system keeps anticipating. So let us go deeper into this. When Vata increases in the 11th house, the first thing that becomes disturbed is rhythm. Not just physical rhythm, regulatory rhythm. The slide points us toward hypothalamic dysregulation, and that is extremely important because now we are talking about the part of the system that helps coordinate sleep-wake cycles, hunger fluctuations, temperature sensitivity, emotional restlessness, and stress response. In other words, when this house is destabilized by Vata, the person may not feel sick in an obvious way at first. They may simply feel off. Sleep becomes inconsistent. Hunger becomes irregular. Stress response becomes exaggerated or poorly timed. The body reacts too quickly or not coherently. The mind becomes fast but not grounded. That is the key distinction. Vata can make cognition quick, sharp, associative, future-oriented, highly perceptive. But here in the 11th house, that speed can become unstable. The person starts thinking ahead too much, planning too much, anticipating too many scenarios, tracking social outcomes too closely, reading the future not as a field of possibility but as a field of uncertainty that must be mentally controlled. So the intelligence may become impressive but not peaceful, and that is where the healer must listen carefully. Because a person with 11th house Vata aggravation may present as socially functional, mentally active, even visionary, but underneath that there may be emotional restlessness, network anxiety, support insecurity, and an inability to feel settled in collective spaces. That is why the emotional expression on this slide is so revealing. Social anxiety, feeling disconnected from networks, fear of losing support systems, instability in friendships, overthinking social dynamics. This is not random. This is the emotional side of Vata moving through the 11th house. You begin to understand that the person may not merely fear people. They may fear unpredictability inside people. They may fear inconsistency in belonging. They may fear losing access to support, approval, protection, or future pathways. And because the 11th house is so linked to long-range outcomes, the emotional body starts becoming future anxious. So the problem is not only relationship, it is anticipated relationship. Not only support, anticipated loss of support. Not only friendship, anticipated instability in friendship. That is a far deeper reading. Now let us bring in the planets shown here because they tell you how this Vata pattern is being shaped. Saturn is crucial. Saturn in this field gives chronicity to the anxiety. Saturn slows, dries, constricts, suppresses, and prolongs. So when Saturn influences this 11th house Vata terrain, the native may develop long-standing fear around belonging, long-standing hesitation in group spaces, or a chronic expectation that support will be delayed, conditional, or unreliable. Saturn does not merely create discomfort here. Saturn can create emotional hardening around community. The person may say, I do not trust networks, or I always feel like I have to earn my place, or even when people support me, I cannot relax. That is Saturn moving through the social nervous system. Now Rahu. Rahu intensifies the 11th house because Rahu has a natural hunger for amplification, for reaching outward, for grasping at more, for destabilizing ordinary limits. In the 11th house, Rahu can produce obsession with gains, validation, visibility, audience, or future success. But under a Vata frame, that becomes psychologically expensive. The mind begins to overrun itself. The person may constantly compare, constantly monitor, constantly project possible outcomes, constantly wonder who is loyal, who is useful, who is drifting away, who is ahead, who is not responding, what the future support structure will look like. So Rahu does not just create desire here, it creates agitated desire. And that is why social overthinking becomes so intense in some people. They are not merely being insecure. Their 11th house field is carrying a Vata Rahu acceleration that converts desire into nervous forecasting. Then Ketu in the same field produces almost the opposite expression but with equal instability. Ketu disconnects, reduces, severs, internalizes, and creates unusual detachment. So where Rahu may obsess over networks, Ketu may feel disconnected from them. Where Rahu may chase future gain, Ketu may feel strangely vacant about social participation. Where Rahu amplifies social noise, Ketu can create alienation, withdrawal, or difficulty sensing one's place in the larger collective. This is why two people can both have 11th house disturbance and yet look completely different. One becomes overengaged and anxious, the other becomes detached and emotionally unlocated. Both are unstable, but one expresses through excess, the other through disconnection. Now add the moon. The moon here makes this deeply personal because moon brings mind, emotional memory, sensitivity, nourishment, and the need for psychological safety. When moon enters a Vata disturbed 11th house environment, belonging becomes emotional weather. Social shifts are felt internally. Group tension is felt in the body. Delayed communication can disturb sleep. Unclear support can disturb appetite. Future uncertainty can disturb emotional equilibrium. This is why moon here often correlates with people who are highly responsive to social atmosphere, but do not always know how to metabolize that responsiveness. They feel too much. They anticipate too much. They absorb too much. And finally, Venus. Venus in this field introduces the longing for harmony, ease, softness, and relational pleasure. But in a Vata disturbed 11th house, Venus may not fully stabilize the system. Instead, Venus can make the person deeply aware of what relational ease should feel like, while also showing how difficult it is for them to sustain it. So, they may deeply value friendship, support, affection, mutuality, and beautiful connection, yet still feel anxious within those very spaces. This creates an important internal contradiction. I want closeness, but I cannot fully relax into it. I want community, but I overread every shift. I want support, but I fear instability around support. That is a very refined Venus Vata expression in the 11th house. So, what is the master principle you should take away from this teaching? The 11th house under Vata disturbance does not only show irregular gains, it shows irregular regulation around hope. That is the real insight. The person may struggle not because they have no future, but because their nervous system cannot settle into the future. Not because they have no support, but because support feels unstable. Not because they lack intelligence, but because intelligence runs ahead of stability. Not because they are antisocial, but because the emotional body becomes overactive in collective and future-facing spaces. This is why advanced healing and advanced astrology must meet. As a healer, you listen for dysregulation in anticipation, belonging, and support. As an astrologer, you read how planets modify the person's social nervous system. As a serious student, you stop reducing the 11th house to gains alone and start seeing it as a distribution field for desire, validation, regulation, and future expectation. And once you see that, your chart reading becomes far more alive. You start asking better questions. How does this person experience support? How does this person react to uncertainty in networks? How does ambition affect their nervous system? How does future planning affect their sleep, appetite, stress, and emotional balance? Are they restless because life is unstable or because their regulatory field is unstable? That is where interpretation becomes real. If this kind of deep astrology is the work you want more of, stay with me, because we are unpacking the houses as living fields of body, mind, and consciousness, not as flat keywords. And if you want me to help you understand how these patterns are operating in your own chart or in the chart of someone you are trying to help, book a reading through astrovagmi.com. Subscribe. Share this with a healer or astrology student who is ready for deeper work. And let me know which house you want me to break down next in this Jyotish Ayurveda framework.